So for those of you who've been around HITRUST for a little while, we feel pretty passionately about third-party risk management. Arguably, the work that we're doing is solely focused in some ways on building trust between organizations. But I think there's still a lot of work to be done. So first off, I want to have our panel introduce themselves. So Rob, if you can start.
Sure. I'm Robert Goddard. I'm one of the partners at IS Partners. Day-to-day's responsibility are QAing for our SOC engagements, also overseeing our HITRUST and healthcare practice.
Yeah, and my name is Ian Terry. I'm one of the principals at IS Partners. I oversee our cybersecurity services program. We specialize in a myriad of different frameworks and assessments, and also we do penetration testing, technical services, and things like that.
And I'm Blake Sutherland. I'm on the market engagement team and work closely with our ecosystem partners as well as our communities to solve problems.
Well, let's jump right in. Rob, I'm going to start with you. So TPRM is not something that's new. Arguably, people have been trying to overcome it for years, if not decades. What are you seeing in the current state of affairs when it comes to TPRM?
Sure. So what I'm seeing currently out in the field is it's very fragmented, and especially in terms of when our clients come to us and they're asking for, different assessments or anything. It comes from their clients internally, not understanding what they're looking for, how to implement it. I do think that there needs to come back to a basic fundamental of understanding the risk level of the organization and what the third party is requiring from them.
And are you seeing, a problem with both sides of the coin, right? Because if you think about TPRM, it's all about relationships between organizations.
Yep.
Is it one side? Let's think about HITRUST calls them relying parties that rely on assurance mechanisms like HITRUST or SOC or ISO or what have you, or is it on the vendor side or the third-party side, or both?
I would say it's a little bit of both. Kind of a good example that Ian and I just kind of went through recently with one of our clients, longtime client. They came to us, we do HITRUST with them, multiple HITRUST engagements. They came to us because they had a prospective client wanting to come in. They were going to be a downstream entity to that individual client. They were asking for a NIST assessment to go along with the HITRUST assessment. But to them, it was a misunderstanding of, well, we're already doing 3 different HITRUST assessments with them. Why do we need to do any more with the NIST and the fundamentals? So I think that there is a certain aspect of, the third party in and of itself, what they're asking for. Why are they asking for it? Is it applicable, especially knowing what the other, what they're asking for from the client in and of itself? Are they already meeting what they want? The fundamental aspect of the third party.
And are you seeing more well-known assurance mechanisms like HITRUST or NIST or something else, or is it a combination of some of those more recognized practices and questionnaires? I always, every single day talking to the market, people are complaining about questionnaires.
Well, you'll know a lot about the questionnaires, especially on your end, because we get that all the time with the questionnaires. So I mean.
Yeah, that's like the backbone of security now is questionnaires, right, in the vendor ecosystem. And I think to reinforce Rob's point is that a lot of times relying on your internal resources to come up with their own standard and their own questionnaires and things like that, it's better to let your resources focus on your core competencies, right? Which is likely, running a cyber operations division or running a GRC program, rather than trying to come up with, a sustainable third-party risk management program, along with speaking to and attempting to interrogate all the idiosyncrasies of the different vendors of their ecosystem.
Yeah.
And then, another massive challenge here is just the concept of scalability, where the complexity of vendor ecosystems are getting so outrageous, and a healthy program is not only doing an initial assessment, but there's some degree of sustainability there that you need to implement, where you're doing reassessments, reanalyzing, re-examining your vendor ecosystem. And that is where we're seeing in the industry the adoption of really efficient, effective, and robust tools to facilitate those vendor interactions Is there a questionnaire part of that? Certainly, probably in most of those platforms, but really that is the only way to sustain or achieve sustainability, adopting the use of a tool, adopting the use of the platform, so that you can keep on top of your vendors as they progress in their own development and really the industry and the circumstances and the threats in the landscape change themselves.
Actually, that's what I hear mostly on the vendor side is the scalability problem, right? Who has the time or the resources to go and check up that the answers are correct, look for evidence, evaluate the evidence, periodically audit or assess them? I mean, there's a whole community that can do that for them.
So I think I'm sensing there's a problem. There's some inefficiencies, right? It's almost as if I knew this stuff and I'm trying to get you to talk about it. But why, like, what's the outcome of, let's say there is a mix of whether it be HITRUST, SOC 2, NIST, with questionnaires, like what's the outcome? Like what is both sides of the coin experiencing? From what I'm hearing, they're tired, they're burnt out, they're frustrated. Like, is that what you all are hearing?
I'm definitely hearing that they're tired and frustrated. You know, from my aspect of it internally, I think it's just taking it back to fundamentals. And when I look at it, you know, let's just say you're starting with your first HITRUST R2. One of the main aspects of it is that your ISMP program, you know, you should have some fundamental framework internally to assess even your own selves. But take that aspect of it and just take down to the basic level and use that same framework even to assess the entities, the third-party entities that are asking for your ability to work with them. I think if they were just to take that aspect and bring it down, that they would have a more understanding of it.
And your customers that have customers that are subjecting them to questionnaires and such, what do you think the effort to actually fill out those questionnaires is in a repeated fashion?
It's a lot of effort. It's a lot of effort.
Yeah, I almost liken it in the concept of incident response and alerting and monitoring, audit logging and monitoring, the concept of like alert fatigue, right? Where you're being faced with the same kind of alerts over and over again, you know, you kind of stop paying attention. And I think that same concept could be applied to those questionnaires and just a TPRM program in general. You know, you're assessing the same company over and over again. They're responding to the same questions over and over again. They're kind of getting questionnaire fatigue, and you're just getting monitoring fatigue to the point where you get to a place where you lose that transparency, you lose that insight into your own vendor ecosystem and what those vendors are doing, just because you've assessed them so many times, and you're just copy and pasting last year's, you know, responses, or just copy and pasting last year's conclusions that you made or risk analyses that you performed. So, you know, then are you really keeping up with the latest and greatest standards and expectations and things that you should be scrutinizing, and B, are you keeping up with the unique developments occurring with that vendor?
Yeah, I was at a conference last week, and the keynote was the global procurement officer for JPMC. They have a $26 billion vendor spend. They're spending $26 billion just on their partners and vendors. That's crazy to think about. And he was talking about how they risk tier, right? Risk tiering and risk triage is critical for TPRM. So they have 7,000 vendors. It whittles down based on risk triaging down to 4,000. They run them through risk analysis, some on an annual basis, some at a different frequency. But when they find those most critical vendors, they actually schedule a 2-day audit of those vendors. Now, that may sound really progressive, but you two, as external assessors and security professionals, do you think you could effectively audit an organization in 2 days?
No.
Yeah, in a word, probably not. I mean, you know, coming from an assessment background, many people here, you know, you're familiar, a realistic time frame that I like to communicate, 30 to 45, right, for a simple assessment, and then something like a HITRUST R2. You know, you would put the timeline up on the slides on Tuesday, I think it was. You know, those can take a long time, and usually it requires that much time to really get in depth and understand, you know, who you're going to be working with. So, yeah, 2-day turnaround. That is a.
It's better than most, but I you know, in my practical mind was like, that seems like a paper shuffle in a lot of ways. I don't know how much due diligence is going into that. But I also find it ironic because Blake and I, we work with, again, I use the HITRUST term, relying party, on a daily basis. And these folks, they'll accept HITRUST, but they'll still send out questionnaires. And then in the same breath, they'll say, hey, Ryan, I'm HITRUST certified. How can I get my customers to stop sending me questionnaires? And I'm like, you're the one, you're doing what you don't like.
Yeah.
Like, nobody likes what we've built. Why are we doing this? All right, I'm off my soapbox maybe temporarily. So really to the group, I think we've defined a problem. It's an ongoing problem. I have my own theories, but why do you think we have this problem? Like, what are the elements that make TPRM unsuccessful or inefficient?
Yeah, I think that TPRM as a concept, it's not a very old one, right? I mean, we really didn't see a major focus and attention, on cybersecurity in general, but certainly the impact that your vendors have on your own privacy and security. It really didn't even come into the fold until something like a decade ago, if not less time. So, what I see is a lot of different awesome experiments, some not so great experiments in how to kind of come up with these ideas, but for many entities, who maybe came up with a bespoke solution, a bespoke standard, their own questionnaire, et cetera, we're seeing that rather than adapt or react to the improvements in TPRM and new research, new revelations on the topic, they're choosing to kind of stick with their own system or stick with their own approach rather than open their mind to these new ideas and these new approaches that are out there in the market.
Or they just make them additive, right?
Right, yes, which only makes the whole thing complicated and take more time in itself.
Yeah. Maybe my perspective on that going back to the relying party side is, in this room, we're focused on information security and information risk management as part of the information supply chain. Vendor risk management covers a lot of other aspects. There's financial risk, there's legal risk, there's all sorts of other things that are part and parcel of the process of bringing a vendor or getting into a relationship. So I think part of our challenge is, while we've focused very distinctly on our lane, which is the information risk management, there are other aspects that we need to be more efficient about.
Yeah, and I agree with that, because I do think that there is even fragmentation internally with that. So while we're on security, the aspect of it is legal talking to security, maybe it's HR, procurement talking to security. Are they all on the same page? Are they all working from the same sheet of music? And that kind of goes back to my aspect in the beginning of this conversation, is I think that there's a fundamental fragmentation within the company in and of itself to just say, hey, who are we as an entity? What do we want to base our frameworks on?
Yeah, you hit on something that I feel is a big part of the problem, just based on my own observations and what people are telling me, is there's really too many stakeholders making the buying decision, right? My mind, maybe it's because I have a security background, my mind immediately goes to the CISO owns TPRM. But I just told the story that the chief procurement officer is in the fold. Well, the CFO probably has a hand in this. The business owner who actually wants this vendor, product, service, or whatever has a say in this. So trying to get alignment across the board is really, really hard. From a buying perspective, not to think about actually building a program to manage all this. Everybody has an opinion.
Well, we heard yesterday on the panel, insurance has a big part to play in this
Right.
as well, as part of either financial risk or other. So,
Okay. I mean, there's some other things that I think weigh in on this. There's a session later today, shameless plug, that I'm in. I think it's at 10:30 or 10:35, talking about innovation, but I personally feel that the inefficiencies in TPRM stifle innovation. It slows down the speed of business. Or you get the converse, we go through the due diligence process so fast that it's just not getting at the crux of what needs to be considered.
well, with breach rates, business interruption being at the levels that they are, it's clearly not working.
Okay, here's the curveball. Ian, I'm coming to you.
Uh-oh.
We've used the term AI about 1,000 times. It might be on your bingo cards. I'm not sure. how does AI complicate this?
It's a great question, and I think, in a word, the response is substantially. AI coming into the fold, taking into consideration applying third-party risk management to all of the AI platforms and tools that are so appealing to different companies and ourselves as individuals, is a unique challenge, and it's AI introduces a lot of unique challenges. I think one that stands out to me, to kind of reuse some of your wording there, like rate of innovation, is the rate of adoption, right? And this is like the use of AI and the appeal of it. This is not like a 3-year cloud migration project, where we have time for like speed bumps, road bumps, project delays, et cetera, right? This is, you can go on your web browser, go to a very reputable, well-known AI program, right, and overhaul a business process in 5 minutes, right? So how can companies keep up with the that rate of adoption or that desire on the part of like their own institution, their own employees and resources? Their desire to get involved with AI is so deep, and it's going to happen so fast. Coming up with a solution as soon as possible to manage and figure out what that risk looks like is going to be paramount.
Yeah, you hit on something that I previously, maybe 3 weeks ago, was at a different conference. They were talking about AI, as everybody is, and they said that the next major iteration or evolution of AI is not next year. It's likely next month, right? That's how fast that industry or the change is happening in adoption and deployment, and unfortunately, education is not there.
Right.
Everybody is trying to wrap their arms around what this means. I've talked to some customers that they just don't know, from a TPRM perspective, where to get started, because they already have these hundreds, if not thousands, of vendors that probably have AI already built into the products that they have purchased. So where do I start? Like,
Right.
Any thoughts from anybody on some advice out there for the group?
Well, and yeah, one more thought. I've been talking to so many awesome other entities here, other people representing them, and a lot of them, have AI as part of their services and their tools. And one thing that I'm taking away immediately from all those people is that, they're so smart, right? And I think back to Tuesday, Omar of Databricks was talking about his kind of almost like hardline approach to their vendor ecosystem. He commented that, internally, like, my GRC team needs to focus on what they're good at, right? I don't know how many of you guys have a bunch of like AI PhDs on your GRC programs. I mean, probably not. If you do have PhDs at your company, they're probably not on the cybersecurity team, but maybe that's just me projecting. But reinforcing that concept where, do we really have the expertise to come up with our own standard, our own questionnaire that's going to get to the core of how these AI systems work? Probably not, right? We should probably rely on some type of external standard that's built by researchers, built by academics, that informs our assessment methodology rather than come up with a bespoke solution ourselves.
Any other thoughts?
Yeah, I think you put it very well in very good context on your end.
Go ahead, please.
And I do think the kind of the process that HITRUST is taking with their current AI involvement is a step in the right direction, because it's not taking away. It's not
He
taking
didn't say
away.
it, I was going to say it.
Yeah, well, no, I was gonna say, it's not taken away from the core concept that I've been trying to speak about here, is the fundamentals. There's still the aspect of it's an add-on to the core fundamentals. They don't just go away.
Right.
So, and what you're gonna start seeing is people, again, to the point of fatigue, they're gonna be worried about AI and forget completely about the fundamentals of your program to begin with. So those don't go away. It's just an add-on to them. So you gotta keep the core still intact.
I personally completely agree with you. I think we're, rightly so, overthinking this, at least from a TPRM perspective. A lot of organizations, if not most, have existing TPRM processes. We've now highlighted that they may be inefficient, redundant, and not scalable, but you can utilize those existing processes to incorporate AI. Okay, so I mean, we're going to get into kind of what HITRUST is doing to tackle this problem, but I wanted to share, because I have been so doubly named the advisor to this council, that there are some organizations out there, primarily in healthcare, that are trying to tackle this problem. So some of you may know of the organization called Health Third Party Trust, or H3PT. I am an advisor to that council for HITRUST, I guess. And I mean, they're really trying to get their arms wrapped around this problem. In fact, yesterday or the day before, we had a council meeting where we were talking about a lot of this stuff. And if you don't know who they are, you can go to health3pt.org. They are putting out guidance on, what are some practices or principles that every TPRM program should incorporate or include. They're putting out sample contract language because we haven't talked about it yet. Contracts actually matter. People will do what's in the contract mostly. So if you're not familiar with that organization, get familiar with it. Join the initiative. It is really, it's not a legal entity per se. It's really a consortium or a collaboration among healthcare entities that have recognized that this is a problem and we need to regulate ourselves, or the government's going to come in very heavy-handed and start to enforce either new laws or regulations.
And certainly they're trying to balance between the vendor perspective and making the whole thing efficient, as well as the relying party perspective. They're also tackling, I understand, some new areas in their recommended practices, like cyber insurance and what people should look for. And I think AI's on their next topic list. So.
It is. And right now the council's made up of about 26 individuals from 20 different healthcare organizations, but you can participate in the initiative, and they also have stood up something called their vendor subcommittee, because they want the voice of the vendor to be heard as they're developing these standards and or practices that they're making available for the industry. There's another organization called the Third Party Risk Association, or TPRA, that's trying to tackle it. They're doing it similar, but not the exact same way as H3PT. So there's organizations who have recognized that this is a problem. So Blake, I'm going to come to you. What are we doing about it? What is HITRUST trying to do?
Well, we've been doing a lot, and we've been doing it a lot for 17 years. And I bring this up just to give a marker in terms of there's a process associated with TPRM. And as we mentioned earlier, it's a common process even outside of the information security risk perspective. You need to identify your vendors. You need to go through some due diligence, which involves risk triage. You got to get some level of risk assessment done. Then you got to look at mitigations and evaluation, whether you'll accept that risk, all these steps, right? So, and we have been trying to solve this problem and believe we have solved it, over the course of 17 years. And it took 17 years, literally, to come up with inherent risk questionnaires to help identify and categorize and triage risks for organizations, then match them to an assessment or an assessment portfolio that represents different levels of assurance that are commensurate with the inherent risk. And then tracking of remediation through corrective action plans, distributing electronically, linking that with a platform, having an independent assessor community for independence, having education programs, all this stuff. And we felt we solved it, but we didn't solve it, because there was the last mile. And until you go the last mile, it's hard to get there. So we've operationalized all this in what we call the HITRUST Assessment Exchange. In fact, there are multiple organizations here that take advantage of this service from HITRUST. But again, it stands independently from the existing TPRM platforms that organizations commonly use. And in terms of what's new, what are we doing about this? Solving this last mile is we're committing to integrate this platform, which operationalizes all these capabilities and make them available, and integrate them with leading TPRM vendors, starting with ServiceNow. So we're integrating with ServiceNow. We have a private preview program that's available to interested parties. We encourage our community, if you're a ServiceNow customer, to join that and give our product teams feedback. What I find very exciting about the program, to get to private preview, we've done a lot of work already. So it's already taking life from just seeing the power unleashed from simple things, from integrating into workflows that are part of an existing platform's workflow, to being able to go into and ingest the rich and relevant and reliable data from a HITRUST assessment and be able to look at a vendor very closely and see the details. Having all that data available is also allowing our customers to create their own dashboards, look at risk. Risk is in the eye of the beholder, so everyone wants to be able to customize. So it gives them that powerful capability. But what we're also finding is having that data available allows them to create sort of sub-workflows. If you see something that you're concerned about, those sorts of things. And ultimately, in our minds, it's about the final outcome. It's about reducing risk. And in our minds, that's about population analysis. You have a lot of risk-based decisions, information risk-based decisions to make with respect to your vendors. So whether it's selecting a new AI vendor who's going to process some of your data and give insights on your data, whether it's, lots of procurement departments go through vendor reduction. You try to reduce the number of vendors that you have in your ecosystem. Another outcome that we've been discussing is, part of our relevance and reliability is we're always interrogating our controls based on what's going on in the threat environment. So you can imagine an advisory coming out from HITRUST that says, maybe it's the next Heartbleed or Log4j or vulnerability in the world, and it has a critical impact. Well, you can now very quickly look across your population and see who's got the proper patching, who's scoring high on patching, who's scoring high on vulnerability management. Maybe prioritize your outreach to your vendors based on some risk guidance within your ecosystem. And lastly, being able to look across your population and say, what is my risk? What is our organization's risk across that? So.
Blake, can you go back 3 slides to the slide just before the ServiceNow? The next one, please. This one. So we didn't dig into a lot of this, but what I think is pretty compelling. So we talked about the inefficiencies up front, right? And one of the inefficiencies is if I'm accepting HITRUST, NIST, SOC, ISO, what have you, questionnaires, that's all being accepted and delivered either through spreadsheets, PDFs, maybe Word documents. It's really hard to do what you just said and analyze across your vendor pool where the actual risks reside.
Yeah, what do? Look up all your PDFs and pull
take a long
1,000
time.
PDFs out and look at their patching practices?
Right, and now you have to compare. There's no standardization, right?
Correct.
And on this slide, if you look on the right side of the slide underneath update and renewal, HITRUST has something called the results distribution system. So for HITRUST certified organizations, you can digitally send your assessment results, your certification results to whatever customer you're asking that's asking for this information, and it goes in a structured way.
Mm-hmm.
Right now, in the TPRM module for ServiceNow, it is hard, if not impossible, to do what we're now
being
building.
able to do. Yeah, and 2 important things. One is we expect this to be generally available by the end of the year, so in Q4, and it will be free to our community. It'll show up in the ServiceNow store. And
Amen. The free part.
Oh, okay.
So we kind of sprung this on the 2 of you. As security professionals, does this make sense? Do you think it helps solve the problem?
I would say absolutely. I mean, right off the bat, we're seeing it map back to so many of the third-party challenges that we had gone through, right? I mean, scalability, this is it, right? This is single pane of glass. You're able to look across the landscape, see those results, get that standard, right? One that necessarily doesn't have to be bound by your own expertise or knowledge about standards, risks, AI, et cetera, right? You can look to a trusted entity here to come up with those things for you and continuously develop them in that threat-informed perspective, right? So that is awesome. Starting out with ServiceNow is so cool, and obviously, I imagine in the future that's only the start, right? And that's that kind of flexibility there for you to use your own tooling, right, your own platform that you might already have, but still be able to tap into that HITRUST resource is going to be invaluable for companies.
Blake, you want to talk about?
Yeah, actually, that's a good point. So our commitment is to integrate with major platforms. So as part of the preview program, if you're not a ServiceNow customer and you have a platform that you want us to consider and get in the queue, so please reach out and let us know.
So, I mean, it may be a little redundant for some of the other sessions that have gone on here, but why us? Why should they rely on the assessment portfolio as the standard?
Are you asking me directly, or is that for the?
Well, I was looking right at you.
Okay, I noticed that. So my answer would be 0.64%. The trust report. Like, if your goal in third-party risk management is to manage risk, and you have something that demonstrates that it truly reduces risk, that the insurance industry is recognizing that it truly reduces risk, then you should consider it as a powerful tool in terms of reducing risk. And that's why we talk about this as the last mile. We've been very focused on relevance and reliability in order to achieve that. And now we're trying to put it into the tooling that makes sense for organizations to take advantage of. And I mean, we brought it up earlier. Many people in this room are not procurement officers. Like, this actually helps you bridge inside your own organization to the tooling that the other parts of your organization are likely using to solve this problem and that you need to contribute to.
And I agree. I think from HITRUST perspective, what they're very good at is moving forward. The different versionings, a lot of third-party programs may just stay stagnant. They're again, back to the questionnaires. They'll stick with the questionnaires. Every year it's rinse and repeat. At least you know with the HITRUST framework, it's constantly evolving. There's new threats out there, new frameworks that can be inputted into the common security framework. And I think because of that, they're continuously pushing the industry further and assessing risks as they come up.
And we didn't really talk statistics, but I think in my pre-conference I said that roughly 53% of organizations have suffered some kind of breach or incident in the last year. On top of that, or within that 53%, I think it's greater than 70% are from third parties, right? So you're more likely to suffer an incident or a breach from your third parties than you are organically. So I agree with your point that we gotta solve this. We gotta figure it out. We gotta get back to the fundamentals. So here's my final question to you all, and then we'll open it up for questions in the audience. Is what can they do? What can the audience do? What is your advice?
Well, I would say, start off with just pick a standard, pick a perspective through which you want to view your threat landscape, view your vendors, et cetera, right? Because that's going to inform everywhere you go from there. And I think HITRUST, I always think of that authoritative sources crosswalk, where you can go on, you can get that file, take a look, HITRUST requirements, there's like 50 tabs there at the bottom. Maps to this framework, maps to that framework, maps to that framework, right? That's why I personally love HITRUST as that framework. But just generally, start with picking that framework and use that to inform your approach moving forward, I think is going to be a great start. And then from there, look at the market and see what is available to solve the other challenges, scalability, risk-informed decision-making, single pane of glass, right? But start there with the trusted framework, rather than trying to kind of come up with a bespoke approach yourself, because it's a little more challenging than you would think. And
yeah, there's a sustainability problem there.
Exactly.
So I'm a simple Army guy. I want to translate that. Less reliance on questionnaires, more
yeah.
standardization, increase the scalability, increase the speed of innovation in business. Okay. Any other advice from anybody else?
I think from the aspect of even just us as assessors is to, communicate and preach when our clients come to us and they're asking for whatever, an assessment because they're contractually obligated to perform that assessment. And it's for us to convey the fundamentals of why they're being asked for that. Hey, how can you communicate? We may be teaching them also because they're getting the contract. They may not understand why they're getting that contract. So it's also for our responsibility as assessors to, even teach our clients, hey, they may be asking for this because of X reason. They're asking for maybe a NIST assessment, but you're already performing a HITRUST assessment. They may not understand that crosswalk or vice versa. So I think the education that we can provide our clients, because we're involved in it all over all different types of organizations, is invaluable.